So what is the most effective chiropractic marketing? What's the most effective? Well, it's a combination of educational sales and trusted relationships. That's the most effective. Why? Well, there's 3 types of marketing, right? Publicity, advertising, and educational sales. Let's relate it back to the S-curve. Based on the market, 8% over here, 92%, 3 out of 4 of them have problem. We know publicity and advertising, that's what's used here because there's a need. Over here it won't work at all. There's no perceived need. So what is the most effective? So 3 core factors to any purchase. We talked about this. These are major components that make up marketing. Need relative to obstacles, relative to trust. This formula. There's some formulas you just have to know. You got to know like this basics of S-curve. Left side, right side. Need versus obstacles. Okay, that's like number 1. Do I need to establish need first, or do I need to come over here and go into the obstacle category? That's number 1. Then I have to understand the basics that there's this thing called a target market, that I just don't go everywhere. I don't just chase everybody. There's people that have a higher probability. Then I have to understand that when I do go to a target market, that the core of the purchase or the action is the educational sales. It's need relative to obstacles and trust. So if I want to come over here, that's the formula that I got to use. So here it is, 3 core factors. So the more of these that you use, the more the effectiveness of your marketing goes up. That's what happens. And then I'll get to the absolute best marketing, period, bar none. So, why is educational sales the most effective marketing? We talked about that. Publicity only affects trust. Only one of the 3 parts of the core of the equation. Advertising affects 2 out of 3, obstacles and trust. You're still over here to people who have a perceived need. That's too small in chiropractic. Publicity and advertising only work for target marketing, looking for the 8%. Educational sales works for the target marketing, looking to those who don't have a need yet are looking. 8% are looking, 92% are not looking. 75 of the 90%, 92% have a need. So that's why we want to use a combination with educational sales first, because that's going to attract the highest percentage of a market, this market over here, the right side of the S-curve. So we want to combine educational sales. So how big is the need market? We talked about it. Lower back pain being second leading hospital admissions, second leading reasons to seeing a GP, second leading workers' compensation. Arthritis is the number 1 disability. Massive amount of business out there, massive. They're just not looking for chiropractors. So why educational sales is most effective? Educational sales, 8 plus 75% and then 92% not looking. So here's the difference. You're dealing with 8% over here or 68% over here. There's 68% potential here when you subtract 75% of the 92%. 68 versus 8. This is not a marginal difference. This is why I can talk to 10 people, and it doesn't even have to be a target market. I can round up 10 people in this hotel, put them here, do an educational sales presentation. I'll get 7 of them as new patients. None of them were looking for a chiropractor. And I can do it again and again and again, over and over and over. Because that's how big the market is. It only works though when you use the right formula to get it. So, what's the original equation we said? What's the absolute most effective marketing? So we have to combine educational sales, because of what we just covered, with what? We cover it with what's called introduction marketing. So when you combine educational sales with introduction marketing, it is the absolute most effective marketing there is. Here is what introduction marketing is. Here's what it is. When you get business, you'll only get 1% of business from a cold call. You don't know them, they don't know you, it's not a target market. You can get, by the way, referrals, passive referrals, that's only 7%. You can't wait around for referrals. I said passive referrals. You just treating people good and leaving. Only 7% of the people only 7% We'll get referrals. 15% from leads. Leads. In other words, we know that they have a problem to some degree, but there's no trust. Okay? So we have a higher likelihood of getting that business because they do have a problem that they associate with us treating. Back pain, neck pain. Okay? 15%. Active referrals is 55%. In other words, I can talk to consumers, my patients, and I can increase my likelihood from 7% to 55% if I know what to say. If I don't say anything, I just give good service, it's 7%. We all just go buy our products and services and move on with our lives. That's what we do. We do it all the time, every day. But I can actually stop that patient, go through a sequence, a psychological sequence, and significantly increase the likelihood of getting them to refer a patient. That's called an active referral. In other words, I'm creating it because of a skill level that I have, a communication skill level, okay? And then you can get up to 75% of the business, what's called introductions. 75. Now, this is very important for two reasons. Because remember, what am I covering right now? I'm covering what is the absolute most effective chiropractic marketing and why. That's what I'm covering right now. I'm covering how this works. So we already explained educational sales, one part of the equation. I'm explaining the second part now, which is introduction marketing. So this is why something is more or less effective. So when we do introduction marketing, we have a 75% chance of getting that business. There's two reasons why. Number one, there's trust. Their defenses and resistance are down, and so there's already one of the major components. Remember, what's one of the major components in the purchase cycle? Of the three core components, what's one of them? Trust. Remember, it's need relative to obstacles divided by trust. That's the formula. That's the core formula of a purchase after a target market. Are you with me? So, why does introduction marketing work 75% of the time versus cold calls that work 1% of the time? Why? Because there's already trust there. There's trust. Where does that come from? Circle of influence. We all have circles of influence. People we know, like, and trust. There's 3 different degrees of a circle of influence. There'd be an inner, a middle, and kind of an inner outer, and then a total outer. When it comes to a patient, the inner are the people that live under the same roof. Child, spouse, how much trust and so here's the equation. Why can we get 75% of the business if it's an introduction? There's 2 categories that exist. Number 1 is trust. Number 2 is need. Number 2, in other words, we'll know if there's a need there or not, and there's trust. That's why it works so well. Okay? So, and from a patient's perspective, the inner circle is spouse and kids. People live under the same roof. Is there a trusting relationship there, typically? Yeah. And will one of those members know if another member is having a gateway problem to chiropractic, back pain, neck pain, arthritis? Okay, so if I'm in front of that person, okay, in other words, that's my patient, and I go to their significant other, spouse, kids, will I know, well, there's already trust there, right? And will I be able to very easily find out if they have a problem that I can help them with, back pain, neck pain, arthritis? How easy is that? Very easy, okay? Now, according to the S-curve of economics, what percentage of that circle of influence has back pain, neck pain, or arthritis, or headaches to some degree? Huh? Based on this S-curve right here, well, 92% of the market that's not seeking chiropractic, what percentage of those have a chiropractic problem? 75%. So what do I know about my patient's inner circle of influence, spouse or kids? Would I naturally know based on this formula? 3 out of 4 of them. I know 3 formulas. Remember I said when you look at the S-curve, you look at 3 categories? What's the first category you go? Is there a need? So I know that there 8% of those spouses and kids are going to be looking for a chiropractor in the next year. Okay, but that's a smaller number and it's over a year. I don't want to wait for that. Then I come over here and I go, okay, 92% of that spouse or kids fits into that 92% category. Well, I know 25% of them do not have a chiropractic problem. In other words, a gateway. Not a paradigm shift. Not because you think you can treat everything, they will trust you and believe you and come in for you to treat their bowel movements. I'm talking about gateways. The real reasons people come in to see you. Okay? So, what is that? What's that number? Well, 25% we know will not when it comes to patients. So what do we do with those people? Leave them alone. How easy is it for me to find that out? You're a patient. How easy is it for me to find out if your spouse has back pain, neck pain, arthritis, or your kids have any gateways like that? Instantly. I find that out instantly. It's no problem at all. I find out immediately where they're at on the S-curve. You see how this works? Now, I already know what the probability is. So if I don't know anything about the circle of influence, what do I automatically know where the business probably is just based on the statistics of the S-curve of economics? It's over here. It's in the 92% corridor, but of the 92% corridor, it's in the 3/4%. That's where it is. So I know statistically that's what I'm dealing with if I don't know anything, if I don't ask any questions, okay? But let me get back, we're kind of getting a little deeper, so let me get back to simplifying it. Remember the topic is what makes chiropractic marketing the most effective? We already said educational sales versus advertising and publicity, and we explained why. Now we're adding one other component called introduction marketing. It's more effective than cold calls, passive referrals, or leads. It's called introduction marketing. And the reason is 2 factors exist, trust and there's a need. So is there a higher likelihood when I market to those people? Remember, I got 3 types of marketing. I got publicity, advertising, or educational sales. That's what I got. So when I do one of those systems to an introduction, this is the core of an introduction. The second level, the mid-level, that's friends and family. That's friends and family. That's the second level of circle of influence. And then there's the outer, or actually the middle levels, friends and best friends. The outer is friends and coworkers. So those are 3 different levels of influence. Can you see how I'll have greater influence with somebody under my roof if I know they have a problem, and I'll have greater influence over them versus, say, a brother or sister or mother or father who doesn't live under the same roof? I won't have as much influence, but I'll still know if they have a problem, and there'll still be a trust factor versus, say, a casual friend or coworker. Can you see how there's 3 different degrees? Okay? So, the best, most effective marketing is what then? Introduction marketing combined with what type of marketing? Educational sales. That's the absolute most effective systems there are. Because there's a need, there's trust, and the marketing system I'm using establishes need, eliminates the obstacles, and I'm already in the trusted category. I got all 3 categories filled. Now, if I only do advertising and publicity to the circle of influence, am I going to attract the 92%, any part of the 92% that's not looking for a chiropractor? No. Why? There's no need. There's no perceived need. I got trust. Doesn't matter. What's the most important part of this equation? Need relative to obstacles and trust. What's the most important part of that equation? Need. If you have high trust and no need, are you buying? If there's no obstacles and high trust and no need, are you buying? If there's need and no trust and high obstacles, but real high need, are you buying? Yes, you are. You see how important need is? Need. And how many different types of need are there? What did we say there were? Present pain, future pain, present pleasure, future pleasure, curiosity. So, if I want the absolute most effective marketing, I want to use educational sales because it affects all three. Well, the first thing I want to do is go into a target market to increase the 20th percentile of a target market that give 80% of the purchases. That's the first thing. That's why I target first. Secondly, I want my marketing to affect all three components: need, obstacles, and trust, and only educational sales does that. Then I want to apply it to a high circle of influence. And that's the absolute. That's when you get business like this, left and right, left and right. We'll get 1 out of every 4, every new patient comes in with my marketing program, we get 1 in 4 spouses or significant others. 1 in 4. So every new patient, we get another new patient. How many of those were looking for chiropractors? They weren't. 8%, but so every now and then you get an infrequent spouse or whatever, just from market forces, but it's very infrequent because it's 8%. We can create it like machine work. Because when they come in, I have a system called an educational sales system. They come in, I put them through the educational sales system, and out of every 4 patients, another one. And by the way, I told you this stat that if you're not very good. My doctors that are good at this, it's 1 in 3. Every 3 new patients, they get another new patient. That is, who's that patient? Circle of influence. Circle of influence. This is how we create business left and right. It's everywhere. It's driving by your office all the day. It's everywhere. Business is everywhere. It's just not looking for you. So that is what makes so those are the systems. Now, obviously, I'm talking in broad generic terms, but you think we might have very specific information for all that, for all these systems? Oh, yeah, because it is specific. But that is what makes the marketing most effective, is number 1, understanding the S-curve. When we apply, the largest segment of the market is over here, apply educational sales, and then apply it to where? Apply it to cold calls? No. Leads? No. Introductions. Apply educational sales to introductions. That is your highest probability of getting business. Those are very specific systems. I only had 7 systems. I only had 7 marketing systems to open 77 offices in 20 states. 7 systems. Now, let me share this with you. What happens if I did educational sales to this market down here, this cold call market? Am I going to get business? Yes, I am, because what do I know about that cold call market? If I just take 10 people, in other words, I didn't do anything with filtering them. With a target market, I did no filtering for a target market. So I got 10 random people. Put them in here. What do I know about them just based on the statistics of the S-curve of economics? 75%. That's right. 75% of those people have a chiropractic problem that I can help them with to some degree. Back pain, neck pain, headaches, arthritis. 75%. How do we know that? We know all the stats. Ibuprofen's being eaten like candy. We know all the stats. There's not many homes that don't have aspirin or ibuprofen in their cabinets. It's a massive amount of business. Arthritis is the #1 disability. Do you think chiropractic and arthritis might be a good combination? Let's see, chiropractors who treat joint problems and arthritis is a joint problem. Might that be a good combination of helping arthritic patients? Yeah, it's a very good combination. So, educational sales. So I'll still do it here. I'll do it here. But where is it the best? Introductions. But I'll still take educational sales over advertising any day of the week because of everything you're learning here. Everything you're learning here. So how much money did we spend on advertising and publicity to open 77 offices in 20 states? You know what the budget was? Out of the 7 programs, remember I told you we had 7 marketing programs? How many of them were publicity or advertising based? 1. 6 out of 7 of them were educational sales. So guess what my marketing budget was? Very low. Very low. Because it doesn't work as well. Because when we do advertising, who's the only number it's targeting? 8%. There's 3 different categories of marketing. Advertising is the last category. And you shouldn't even have to do it. The first category is where patients go first. The second category is introduction marketing. And the last category, the advertising categories where we spend money. Chiropractors typically don't know the first or second, and then they're spending money on cold calls. The worst kind of marketing you can do. And then they don't even do a target market. They don't understand primary or secondary needs or motivation. And you wonder why it doesn't work. So this is how and why different marketing works more or less, but the absolute most effective marketing is go to your introduction. There's degrees of introduction. Go to your higher circle of influence first. Now with personal injury attorneys, guess who that is? The attorneys you've worked with in the past. They already know you to some degree. It's not a cold call. There's some degree of trust there. That's a whole nother story than a cold call. Going after an attorney for referrals that you don't know him and he doesn't know you. So the very first marketing we do, because of what I just told you, is we go after your existing attorneys. That's to get more business from them. That's the first. So you want to go into introductions, and then what kind of marketing can we do? Could we use publicity on the introduction market? Yeah. But what's the limiting factor? It's only going to work for the 8% that are looking. Could we use advertising on the introduction market? Yeah. What's the limiting factor? There's only 8% that's looking. And advertising and publicity only works for people who are looking, not for the people who aren't. And the vast majority of people are not looking. So yeah, I can use publicity. I can use advertising. I can go into one good category, introduction marketing, but I'm still limiting myself to the 8% that are looking. Do you understand this? I want both. I want to go into the best category, introduction, where there's trust and there's a problem. And then I want to come in with educational sales that affects all 3 components: need, obstacles, and trust. I already got the trust category because I'm in the circle of influence. I already got it. And then obviously if you start with a target market, so you start with a target market, there's higher, the 20th percentile who's more likely to buy your product or service. 20th with attorneys that's called A, B, and C attorneys. We'll cover that. Same with chiropractic patients. We're going to pay attention to that. So we want the 20th percentile of the target market. Then we want to go into the introduction category and add educational sales. And that is gold. That's where there's a ton of business. But it takes knowledge and skill. And the great news is there's a lot of business. The other great news is there's little to no competition. And that's why I was able to see 350 patient visits a week in a population of 3,000. My town was population 3,000. Had 2 full-time associate doctors, seeing 350 visits a week with 4 other chiropractors in that town of 3,000. Now you think they were seeing 200 or 300 visits a week? No, they were seeing their 40, 60 visits a week. Why? They got market forces. They got the 8%, and then they didn't even know how to keep them. And so those chiropractors were bitching and complaining that it was a bad area. Well, right around the block, I was getting rich. That's the difference. This is the difference it makes. Your knowledge and your skill in marketing. How much of this is relative to your clinical acumen? Where did I cover clinical in here anywhere? No. Why is clinical totally irrelevant? Because they what? They assume you know what you're doing. Why? Because you're licensed. They assume if you're a dentist, you know how to do fillings and pull teeth. That's why the quality factor is totally, essentially irrelevant. Irrelevant.